Hey, everybody. I'm Ted Price from Insomniac Games. On today's episode of the Game Maker's Notebook, I had a wonderful conversation with Joe Shelley. Joe is the game director for Blizzard's massive release, Diablo IV. And we started talking about meeting expectations for such a beloved franchise. And then we jumped right in, covering big decisions that the Diablo team made on tone, classes, skill trees, bosses, endgame, and much more. Now, I'm going to admit I am a design nerd, so we went pretty deep. But I know players and developers alike are going to appreciate all the wonderful behind the scenes info that Joe shared. Please join us.
Sanctuary has always been trapped amid the eternal conflict. A war between angels and demons. But Lilith serves neither side. She was banished ages ago, but this world is her creation.
My children, the lords of hell are coming to devour our world.
Hell is coming. Hell is coming.
Resist her temptation!
I have not come to save, but to empower. I will give you freedom and more. May we fight true in his holy name.
The time of prophecy has come, knights. We march on hell!
I'm glad to be a little nothing, so save me a place.
See now the work of your faith!
Keep a record of the wreckage of my life. Gotta recognize the limit in my mind.
Your lives and those of all humanity depend on what you do next. If we can't stop Lilith, we'll all be damned.
And I'll be alive. Glad to be a little nightmare.
Joe, welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
You got it. And hey, it's awesome to be able to talk to you because I have been playing a lot of Diablo 4, and it is such a great game. I am so impressed with how much there is to explore and how deep the game is. So, as a sort of a warning, I think we could talk for weeks about the intricacy of your system design. And as a design nerd, I really want to do that. But given how big the game is, I want to cover a lot of the big features and learn more about how you and the team tackle them.
Sure.
So
It's a big game.
It is. And so, but I want to start with you. You're a longtime Blizzard veteran. And when you stepped into the role of helming this 25-year-old franchise, a franchise that might be older than some of its players, it must have been a moment for you. What was that like?
Yeah, it's. I think it's a big responsibility. One of the things about a game like Diablo 4 is that we have a responsibility to all the folks who've played Diablo games in the past, as well as, of course, we don't have a responsibility to new players, but we would love for new players to join the game and be able to appreciate all the things that people who know and love Diablo can appreciate. And that means that we, in order for that to happen, we need to do certain things in terms of making sure that um, the game systems and mechanics are understandable to someone who isn't, steeped in a lot of the knowledge of previous games. So it really was a lot. It was really a feeling of responsibility toward the franchise and toward the team, who has really just poured so much into the development of this game and um, deserves to be able to release a game and have everyone get to play it and we're so pleased that on top of releasing a game and having done this work that everyone is so excited about the game and is saying good things about it, and of course that makes us happy.
That's awesome to hear. So you talk about the team. How would you describe the team culture at Blizzard, especially for Diablo 4? And As you when you came on board, did you try to share some ideas on what the culture should be?
Yeah, well, we try to make sure that the culture, and I can really, I'll speak to the Diablo 4 team here. We try to make sure that the culture of the Diablo 4 team is collaborative, and in order for it to be collaborative, um, everyone needs to feel safe and respected and able to communicate freely with each other, and have a certain degree of trust that everyone is working toward what's best for the game, and that everyone respects each other. And so that's something that we've sort of held as important throughout. And you know, a big part of Diablo 4's culture in particular is that. Um, it is a big game and there are a lot of people working on it. And, an individual person working on the game is only working on a small part of the game. But we're all people who love Diablo and we all have ideas about how different parts of the game should be, and we want to know what's going on all across different parts of the game even though it's big. So we try really hard to make sure that we both communicate out what's happening, like what's being worked on, like across the team, and also that we have lots of opportunities for people to play the game and to give feedback outside of the area of the game that they're working on directly.
Well, let's talk about playing the game. Do you have regular play sessions with team members? Is this something you mandate, or is it something that people just choose to do?
Yeah, we do it. We do a variety of different. We want people to who are playing the game. We want people to who are working on the game to play the game. And that's sort of not it's not a hard thing in terms of like whether people want to play the game, like, right? Like people want to play the game, but we're all, working on different things and we have deadlines, and it can be a matter of like, well, I would love to play the game this week, but I have this thing that really needs to be done because, someone else is waiting for it. And so it can kind of get lost in sort of like a priority stack, like I'd love to play the game, but I have these more important things to do. So what we do is we make time at the team level for team play tests on the individual uh, uh, teams who are working on, like the system designers, for example, or class designers. Those teams do play tests with themselves. They bring other people in. If we do, like, maybe we're making a new world boss, for example, the team that's making the world boss will play the world boss, every week for the duration of that development, and then we'll bring other people from the team in to play it to get outside perspectives from different areas. And then I myself, I do a weekly just play Diablo with Joe on Fridays, where I play the game and people can come by and we just talk about, like, oh, why did we do this, or
Oh, that's great. So any team member can just drop in and you all talk about design
yeah,
decisions, systems.
yeah,
Oh, that's a great idea. Cool. Well, something you mentioned just a couple minutes ago was this was you kind of referred to player expectations, and so I got to imagine you and the team have seen a lot of wish lists from players over the years who are fans of the Diablo franchise. What were some of the most important promises you wanted to deliver on for Diablo fans?
yeah. It's such an interesting franchise because it's been, Diablo has been uh, a series for such a long time that we have players who played it, who played Diablo 2 or played Diablo 1 or played Diablo 3, and they have different expectations, like different things that they liked about those games that are what makes a Diablo game to them. And so, part of our approach is to look at what things um, from those past games um, need to be in Diablo 4 so that the expectations from all those players can be met. So if we look at, Diablo 1 and Diablo 2, um, I think those two games do a really good job of establishing sort of the dark gothic tone. Um, some of the art style to some extent. Diablo 3 also has, it has a more colorful uh, palette, but it does have a sort of painterly style as well. So when we thought about the mood and the tone and the art style of Diablo 4, we thought about that dark gothic style from Diablo 1 and 2, and then we wanted to preserve kind of that painterly, timeless element that Diablo 3 had, although with a sort of darker, more serious format. And then, when you think about Diablo 2, it's really a game that, like, certainly Diablo has always been an action RPG. It's always been an action game, uh, you know, but Diablo 2 is especially known for its systems and itemization and sort of the depth and intricacy of all of the ways that those systems work together in terms of breakpoints and you know um, block cooldowns and all kinds of like really nitty gritty stuff. And we wanted to make sure that the players who talk about Diablo 2 often are talking about how they loved how much depth and sort of exploration and mastery of the systems they could uh, dive into. And then when we look at Diablo 3, you really, you know, we think Diablo 3 uh, uh, was very effective at making the action feel very fluid, the controls feel very tight. It feels like the VFX and the um, damage in terms of the player skills, the monster skills feel very visceral. Killing a monster feels really good. We wanted to make sure we carried that action aspect from Diablo 3 forward into Diablo 4 as well.
So pulling some of the best of the previous games into Diablo 4 sounds like what you were deciding. Uh, were there any constraints that you imposed for what might be too much of a deviation from prior games, where maybe at times you had to pull back a little bit and say, "Well, this doesn't fit"?
Mm. Um, One of the things that we did, we wanted to take it seriously, and one of the things that we try to avoid is putting sort of pop culture references into Diablo 4. Diablo 3 does have some, um, and we felt that in the case of Diablo 4 specifically, um, in order to to sort of hit the tone of Diablo 1 and 2 and to treat it seriously and to have players um, see that we were taking it seriously, that um, those kinds of pop culture references probably would detract from that goal.
That's a great example, and I think going back to the tone that you mentioned, I remember reading interviews from you and seeing more information about Diablo 4 before its release about how the tone was darker. And having played it, I absolutely feel that. But when you have to explain what that means to the team during production, how do you do it? What does it mean to you? What did it mean to you and the team when you said we need a darker tone, besides not having pop references?
Yeah. So one of the things that we were able to do is look at some examples of, in the last 10 years or so, there's been lots of things in popular media that have had a darker approach, right? So if
Mm.
you look at things like Game of Thrones or Squid Game or The Last of Us, for example, um, you have a lot of these stories that do have a darker vibe to it and are talking especially about um, the struggles of people in difficult situations. And so um, we used some of those kinds of approaches as sort of examples of ways to tell a darker story, um, while keeping, while thinking about it in a Diablo context, right? And using the background of, Diablo 1 and Diablo 2 in terms of the lore and the storytelling. And obviously, I talked about the art style earlier.
That makes sense. And I have to say, as a player, I do appreciate what feels like some social commentary when it comes to religion. I know that the game's history is steeped in religion, the occult, and sort of the conflict. But I really enjoyed your story elements where you're sort of digging deeper into people's motivations, especially when it comes to how people view sort of deities and worshiping whatever. So I, I don't know if that was intentional. It kind of seemed a little intentional.
I think that the characters in Diablo specifically. So certainly, I think when you tell a compelling story, and a story that is has continuity and has real characters that have real motivations and are making decisions that where there isn't a clear answer necessarily, that by doing that, it provides the opportunity for people who are viewing that or experiencing that story or that gameplay, um, to have to take away something that's meaningful to them. And
Hmm.
so I'm glad that you felt that there was stuff in there that was meaningful. Um, I think in Diablo, we in the story of Diablo, uh, you have this idea that the humans who live on Sanctuary are the product of both angels and demons, and that while certainly it's a game about slaying demons and the demons are doing all kinds of evil things, it's not a situation where the angels are in Diablo are right or um, are treating the humans as uh, are treating the humans well. I would say. So I think that when we think about Diablo 4, we have the opportunity to kind of talk about the creation of Sanctuary and these two characters who are so instrumental in it in terms of Lilith and Anarias. And we get to sort of, because the story is so focused on individual characters, we get to actually sort of explore what are Lilith's motivations and what are Anarias' motivations as characters, and not just as, you know, a force of good or evil, or, an angelic presence.
I really enjoyed that part of the story, or I have so far. It's felt much. Hopefully, I'm being fair here. Even deeper than prior installments, where I really kind of feel like they're fleshed out and complex. Which, I mean, other than the gameplay, really does pull me through the game, which I thought was a wonderful sort of uh, thing you've done for fans. But I also want to acknowledge that the story's big, right? And there's so much additional content beyond the Golden Path story. With so much optional content to explore, how do you keep the main story connected across all of the side quests, and and with the option to sort of proceed almost non-linearly, how do you keep everything feeling coherent as you're moving through the game?
Yeah. So, I mean, certainly there are a lot of whiteboards and virtual whiteboards that our quest designers and our narrative designers and our world designers all coordinated on, and especially our quest design team. Really, I think that with Diablo 4, we did put a particular emphasis on, let's really try to tell the best story that we have ever told. Let's see if we can do better than we've done before, in terms of story. Um, and we put a lot of work into the the story being meaningful and having continuity, and so part of that was, yeah, coordinating the side quests, making sure that we identify sort of the themes of the story in an act, or as a region, so the acts sort of loosely correspond to regions of the world. And so we thought about what's going on in that region and what are the characters there and what are some stories in terms of side quests that can sort of relate to that theme. And not every side quest has to relate to the overall theme of
Sure.
the story, but it helps create a place, and create sort of the setting and the motivations for the characters.
Yeah, I think I can see that and feel it. Even if there isn't a direct connection, I usually feel that there's some oblique reference to the main story, and the characters do in the side quest feel like they're living in this, obviously living in the same world with the same challenges that you're presenting across Sanctuary. Uh, so speaking of side quests, I'll just share that I believe that designing side quests is one of the toughest things that designers have to do in these big sprawling games, just because of the constraints that are often imposed during production. So, do you have a process that you use to ensure that the side quests that come out are varied and surprise players?
Yes, and that's an area, you know, to be to be completely transparent, where we want to continue to make improvements in terms of being able to deliver um, more of this kind of content, because it is challenging to, one of our things that the things that our quest designers really wanted to do is they didn't want to have a bunch of side quests that just felt like sort of busy work, or felt like, well, they didn't want players to feel like, oh, well, the game said someone in the game and the at the at the company said there must be 30 side quests, so I guess you got to go collect 8 bear skins. Um, they wanted to really treat the side quests, although they talk about other characters, or they talk about the world, or the city or the area. They wanted to treat them as other opportunities to tell interesting stories in the world, and not as just sort of collection objectives, or that kind of thing. And so, we put a lot of work into um, some of those stories, and you know, uh, I should also mention that not only that, but we also have folks who worked on the town design, in terms of all the characters in the towns, as you're sort of traveling through. So as you're coming into a city like Kyovashad or Karagar, um, and you have all of these NPCs that are in the town, and those characters are in some cases reacting to the things that are happening in the world. We have this really cool system where the world state can change based on your progress through the campaign. So a town can, in fact, in the case of Karagar, this does happen without spoiling too much of the game, and uh, and so that gives us the opportunity to have the characters react to things that are happening in the world. In fact, one of my favorite situations here is there's a story in Skosglen that, there are some characters in Skosglen. I'm going to be uh, a little bit vague in terms of spoilers, but there's some characters in Skosglen who are key parts of the plot, who are well known for having done something in the past. And if you're sort of paying attention to what's going on in the background in the towns, and sort of reading a lot of and listening to a lot of the characters that are talking, you can see that it's sort of been mythologized. Those characters have sort of been mythologized, from like being humans who are making tough decisions to being sort of great heroes. And as you get to interact with those humans, you see that, well, in fact, they are humans, and it's it's a tough. Everything that happened there was difficult, and that story sort of plays out, and you get to gain a greater understanding of who those characters are and why they make those decisions.
What a great example. I feel that same sort of vibe whenever I discover a new town and take the time to go and talk to all the NPCs who are around, or read the lore that's posted around. So that's cool to know, and I think it's great for I'll call it players who haven't played yet to know that that's an approach they should take. I also want to give a really compliment your town designers. I always felt whenever I entered a town that I I inherently knew the layout, so I could understand pretty quickly where the armory was, or where I could turn in my jewels. I mean, that's really helpful in terms of feeling like, as a player, that you're being efficient with your time. Even though I know we probably shouldn't talk about efficiency in games, but it enhances the enjoyment, because I want to get back to just getting out there and doing what I do with all my weapons. So, what long-winded way of asking is, did you have a set of constraints in terms of town design that you put in place?
Yes, we redid several of the towns for layout reasons, and one of the sort of uh, one of the sort of razors that we used in terms of like making decisions was like, does a real do real towns that people actually have to navigate look like this town? Like, is this town arbitrarily confusing in a way that real towns are not? Even though, cities have been existed for throughout the ages certainly have all kinds of oddities and curiosities in terms of their layouts. Um, Even accounting for that, is our layout of our town confusing to the point where it's really interfering with the player's ability to navigate and experience. And so there were some cases where we had towns that didn't pass that
Hmm.
bar, and so we modified the layout to be more clear. One of the things that we did too is we tried to improve our visual storytelling with the towns. So we have, when you enter a town, there are several entrances to a town or city, and there'll be a main road that leads through that town and to one of those exits, or connecting two entrances to a town. So if you're standing in a town, and you're standing on the main road, uh, you should know that it is the main road, and that you should have visual cues that suggest that if you stay on this road, it will lead you out of the town and not off into an alley somewhere. And so we went back and added more. Like in Scotland, for example, we added more cart ruts that like
Yeah.
lead like here. This is how this take this path and you will end up outside the town, and this is clearly a side path because look, it's going down these steps and it's less traveled. And
Huh.
uh,
Yeah, you're right. I mean, those cues, I'm thinking about my experience, they exist all over the place and they're so subtle that I just I wasn't consciously recognizing them. But yeah, that's a great design technique that I hope people are picking up on. So I mentioned that I really do like using my weapons. And so I have to admit that combat is, I mean, for me, and I'm sure for the millions of players who are going to play, immensely satisfying. And I've been playing a berserker and a necromancer, switching back and forth, and I love it. So, a question for you: what is your approach to making sure that DPS gameplay is satisfying for every class at every level?
yeah, it's you know we want to make sure that players have lots of options and that they know how the sort of basic game systems work.
Hmm.
So, you've got, six actions on your bar that you can choose. We want to make sure that you understand, um, you know, this action is free and costs no resource. This action costs resource and it's going to do more damage. And so we want to make sure that players understand those sort of baseline aspects of the system so that they can make decisions that um, will that the game supports well. And then from there, um, we try to uh, do things to make sure that the players understood, bit commonly called builds, but ways that we design the game so that things will work together in an additive way, or whatever multiplicative way, but be greater. So you know if you look at the skill tree, for example, we have a keyword system where we say like, oh, this is bleed, and here's what bleed means, and then you can search like other things that reference bleed, and you can be reasonably confident that if you put a bunch of stuff that has to do with bleed together, something cool will happen, right? And then once you do that, you can then you're sort of started on that path as a player, and you're sort of in tinkering mode. You're like, oh well, you know, uh, these are all bleed things, but I don't actually use this one, and I think this one should last longer, so I'm going to look for an affix that increases the duration. And oh, what are my legendary powers that can affect this build? And and then you're really having fun, right, as a player. So we want to make sure players have all the information they need to have fun in that regard.
Well, that's a really great tip. I mean, for the new players, using that search bar is essential. I have to say that I put together a whirlwind bleed barbarian, or sorry, berserker, and it's a blast, right? But I didn't realize how much of an advantage I could gain in combat until I started trying to align those skills and some of the armor I'm finding that have the aspects on them that really helped. So that's It's great. It's deep, right? And I think it rewards players that are willing to just dive in a little bit deeper, and it's satisfying. But going back to the balance question, right?
Yeah.
What kind of systems do you have in place to keep what feels like an incredibly complex set of skills and loot balanced between classes, so that people aren't talking about how the rogue is way out, way overbalanced compared to a necromancer?
Yeah. So certainly we have a specific team for a class that works on the classes, and we have another. We have a class team and a system team who are both, broadly speaking, system designers, but are focused on the game systems, like itemization and stuff, and then or are focused on classes and class balance specifically. We also have a great deal of telemetry, so we can look at like how barbarians are doing, or how a single skill is doing. We have sort of philosophies for balance in terms of you know. Uh, how many targets do we expect this skill will hit on average, and therefore how much damage should it do. We have what we call lucky hit, which is proc coefficients on skills. So a skill has a greater chance to trigger a proc uh, if it hits fewer targets, generally speaking. And so we have some sort of guidelines for how we can approach balance that way, and then we can sort of check our work with the telemetry, and through play tests, and through play tests with the players as well. We got invaluable feedback on balance as well. Because ultimately, um, we can do a bunch of math, uh, and say, here's how we think it's going to be. But then players get in and they're finding things that work in different ways, or bugs that maybe we thought something worked a certain way but it doesn't. And so those kinds of play tests, like we did with the early access and open beta, and including the server slam as well, allowed us to fine tune some of the balance, including on the necromancer, for example.
Got it. That all makes sense. And by the way, I apologize. I've been using Berserker instead of Barbarian.
Oh, no
I guess I've
problem.
got Berserk on the brain or something. But yeah, people are going to be listening to this going, "Did he really play Diablo 4?" Yeah. So, yes, I did. I just
Yeah.
brain freeze sometimes. But thank you. That's a challenge, I think, for all of us who are trying to create multi-class games, and it's really cool to hear the process that you use. And I just to sort of continue on the sort of systems discussion. I've What are some of the guiding principles that you and the team have used when designing skill trees for the game?
Yeah. So the skill tree was something that we went through a lot of iteration on. In fact, one of the things that I think has been really cool about this project is that we've tried to share a lot of our development, like as it's going on, with players through like our blogs and stuff. And so if you go back to some of our older blogs, we had like several different versions of the skill tree. Like, here's our skill tree, and then players would comment like, "Oh, it's not deep enough," or um, we had one that was like shaped like an actual tree, like, which is
Mhm.
a perfect, like, it is a tree. It's a perfectly fine way to do it, but then we didn't end up with it. We continued to develop it, right? Um, and so it's really about uh, balancing. There are sort of two competing factors here. You've got players who may have never played a Diablo game before, um, who are and the skill tree is such a critical part of how you're playing your class, like how you're specking out your class, and which skills you're going to use. um, so everyone who plays Diablo 4 needs to be able to understand how the skill tree works,
Mhm.
whether you are have playing tons of action RPGs, tons of Diablo games before, or you're new to it. So it has to be accessible to players, and so that's when we talk about some of the things we do in terms of you have to spend some points in the first area to sort of unlock the second area, and so we sort of guide players a little bit there, and then at the same time, um, since the skill tree is so important to your character development, it needs to have lots of opportunity to make different choices that can be valid and good choices depending on the situation. You need to have lots of opportunity to make interesting choices. It can't just be, well, you can have 1% attack speed or 1% crit. And that ends up not being, that's not a very fun choice for most players. And maybe you have a build where crit is really important and it could be interesting, but generally speaking, it's not very compelling. And so we iterated on what those choices are. If you look at the skill tree, you've got we did a lot of iteration. Like you take a skill, you can put 5 ranks in the skill. You can overrank it through items, which is always fun because it feels like you're breaking the game. But you've got that node. Taking that skill unlocks an upgrade to that skill that we try to make meaningful. And then you have to make a choice. You don't have to make. You can choose not to upgrade it further at all, or there's an A/B choice that you can make between um, two options that change how the skill behaves. So, for example, if you look at the rogue's puncture skill, which is I think it's puncture, which is a dagger skill that throws a dagger about 20 meters. You can choose between upgrading it to throw 3 daggers in sort of a cone, and you can hit the same target with all 3 daggers, and then there can be different effects that happen if you do that. Or you can choose to have it chain from the first target to several others. And so that meaningfully affects how you're going to play that skill. And so we tried as much as possible to make those skills behave in that way so that both the skill tree introduces players to the game and doesn't overwhelm them, but also has lots of interesting choices and depth. And then, of course, um, Diablo is a game that we want players to be able to play for hundreds of hours, and so you know once once you get up to higher level up to past 50 or so, now we can unlock the Paragon system, which can have even more complexity because we know that you have been playing Diablo for 50 levels at that point, so we can make some assumptions at that point about sort of understanding the game systems and complexity.
Yeah, the Paragon system, I have not gotten to level 50 yet, so I can't say that I've dug in at all, but I'm excited about it. I want to come back to that in a couple minutes. But I also want to just applaud the team and thank you all for making it so easy to respec, because to your point, some of those decisions that you make on the skill tree, in other games, it kind of feels like the point of no return, and you're locked in forever. It's so easy to respec in Diablo, and it's a really nice, fun. It feels like you've got your own chemistry set and you're playing with it all the time.
Yeah, we didn't want to make it completely free because we wanted to feel like the choices mattered and that you didn't just feel uh, like you were an everything character, and at the moment you were sort of had clicked this, that we wanted to make it feel like you're playing a whirlwind barbarian or a dagger rogue or something. Um, but there were two ways that we approached making it feel easy to respec. One is certainly the cost in gold to
Mhm.
respec, and it does go up as you get to higher levels, but we adjusted the cost so that it is, we want gold to be meaningful in the game, but you should be able to do it.
Mhm.
Uh, it shouldn't be unreasonable. Um, and the other way that we looked at it is the actual, like, how easy is it in terms of the UX and the controls to move to respec your points. Like, how easy is it to manipulate that skill tree? And so we took several iterations of, like, it takes too many button presses to respec, like, or this is confusing, like, and so we've tried to make it as quick and easy to respec, not just in terms of the cost, but in terms of the experience of moving stuff around.
Oh, it works great.
Thank
So,
you.
so let's shift to an area where I'm guessing you have a passion, and that's bosses. So I know that you've been involved in. I'm pretty sure you've been involved in boss design for a long time.
Yeah.
So what do you think is key to a memorable boss fight?
Yeah. Uh, this is uh, let me see here. I don't want to talk for 4 hours about bosses. um,
What's the most important? If you had to name three things that you
yeah.
think are essential for a memorable boss fight, what would they be?
Well, I think that the boss needs to create to cause the player to have to do something. It has to change the player's behavior. Um, One of the ways that we approached monster and boss design in Diablo 4, and this kind of goes to the way that our crowd control and unstoppable works, is that we thought about like so when the player is fighting regular monsters, the player is mostly acting on the monsters. And there are some times when the monster is doing something that the player needs to react to, especially when you think about elite or champion monsters. But generally speaking, the player is acting on the monsters and they're trying to optimize, hit as many monsters as possible, trigger as many effects that link up to deal more damage. And when you're in a boss fight, um, the boss is mostly acting on the player is acting on the boss, and the boss is acting on the player. But the boss is going to do things that cause the player to react, and that's part of where it becomes interesting because you have a goal. You as a player have a goal. You want to do the maximum damage. You want to survive. You want to defeat the boss, bring the boss health to zero, and then, but but these things are happening that are causing you to have to modify that plan. Like, oh, I have to move out of this thing, or oh, you know, the arena changed in some way, and I have to react to that, or oh, there are other monsters that I have to deal with, and I should kill these monsters first because they're causing some other problem. So I think that's part of it. Um, the designing a boss is about, and we get this with new. One of the things with that I think is a good way for someone who is interested in doing encounter design and maybe just got into it. I think one of the first things to do that's really fun and useful is to make a boss that kills the player. Like first thing you do, make a boss, and the boss just you have no chance because the boss just totally defeated you and does all this damage and all this, and then sort of get that established that yep, you can do that. You have the power to do that, and you have full control over what the boss is. Great. Okay. Now the actual goal of designing a boss is not to see if you can kill the player. You can absolutely do that, but that is not your goal. Your goal is for the player to win the boss fight and have a fun experience doing it, which means that it can't be completely trivial. You need to feel challenging. You need to adapt, like I was saying before. But your goal is for the player to win. It's not for the not to defeat the player. And um, sometimes I think there's sort of a mindset that you kind of adopt there. I had a friend who said, "I don't design bosses to defeat the player. I just design them to lose convincingly."
That's a great mantra.
And then I think the third aspect is, you want it to feel like an epic moment. You want it to be visually exciting. You want to feel like it was worthy of your time in terms of like something cool happened here, and I know that speaks to the sort of the art of it, but it's also a part of the design of the fight. Like it needs to be a cool moment that is interesting and exciting. Like it can't just be mechanically neat. It also needs to be epic.
I think for all the bosses I've encountered so far in Diablo 4, you're delivering on that. And I'll add too to your point about bosses needing to be challenging is they're hard. I find that every boss I encounter for the first time is really challenging, and it inspires me to leave, explore, maybe grind a bit, and then come back. And when I do beat them, it's always satisfying. Uh, so is there an intentional big step up in difficulty for the bosses when you're encountering them at the end of a dungeon for you?
Um, yes, the bosses are designed to be more challenging, but when we think about a challenge, and going back to like, you want it to be a fun experience, which means that there should be some challenge. The tricky part, and I'm as someone who's worked on games for a long time, I know that you know this well, but for the benefit of other folks who are maybe watching, the tricky part, of course, is that the person who's playing the game is there's a enormous variety of different um, skills and ways that players approach games, and so um, you want to provide ways to surmount that, different ways that you can surmount that difficulty in terms of your class design and items and skills, like ways that players can solve those problems. And if you can, provide different difficulties for players who
Mm.
have more or less experience with the game. And so that, you know, we added when we added world tiers to Diablo 4, one of the things that we did is although the world tiers generally um, you know progress as you go up in levels, and as you go up into world tier 3, you're not going to, like, there are things in world tier 3 that are unique to world tier 3, and that's also true of 4. So you're not going to sort of go down to world tier 2 and still do those same things, but on world tiers 1 and 2, they are specifically a difficulty choice in terms of, like, hey, you can do this content. You may be new to this game, and we want you to have some options about how to approach this content. And so we intentionally designed those two world tiers. In fact, um, the world tier 2, some folks have commented that World Tier 2 could be more rewarding than it is. Like, if you're purely focused on efficiency, it might make sense to play in World Tier 1 in some cases. So why didn't we make World Tier 2 more rewarding? And part of the answer is we don't want to over reward World Tier 2 and have players who feel like, oh, well, I would be stupid. I guess I have to play in World Tier 2, if they're not actually ready for that challenge.
Got it. That's great, sort of behind the scenes insight for people. Well, I got one more question on bosses. Do you have a separate team that handles bosses?
We do. We have an encounter design team who make, well, they make the monsters and bosses.
Hmm.
So not a separate team specifically for bosses, but the people who make Goatmen and Goatmen bosses is a team. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I want to add one more question about bosses. Do you, with your experience over the years designing bosses, do you have a kind of a loose metric on how much longer designing a boss takes than most other features? And I ask this because we run into this challenge frequently. We're usually underestimating the amount of time and effort it takes to create a good boss.
Yeah. That's a good way to ask the question. You ask the question in a way that I can answer without saying exactly how long we spend designing a boss. So uh, cleverly asked, I will say. Um, I think that it takes maybe 2 or 3 times as long for us to design a boss. But the thing is that you've got bosses that are, at the end of a dungeon, for example, and then you've got bosses that are like at the end of an act, which
Hmm.
need to feel more like milestones. Because the boss is also, going to that third point about the boss, it's also serving as a climax. Like, if you think about a movie, you've got this rising action, and then you've got this big climax, and then you've got the falling action, and the boss is serving as that. So if you have like a boss that's the boss of an act or the boss of the campaign, it's sort of it needs to do additional work, um, in terms of its presence, and so that translates into extra time, right? So
Yeah.
I think it depends to some extent on how the boss is going to be used, and
Okay.
things like the boss of the campaign, take
Well,
longer, partly because of the spectacle.
Well, I think, yeah, if we're talking about just call it your garden variety boss, who's not the world boss, right? A 2 to 3 times metric is a great yardstick for those who maybe haven't jumped into designing boss encounters, or developers who are start just getting, they're taking on their first action adventure, and they're assuming, like we used to do, that bosses would take about the same amount of time as any of your other standard features in the game, which we always found was way, way, way off. And we're still learning that lesson over and over again. So, but anyway, moving on to another topic, which is, I think, sort of encompasses the entire game. I think that what's really exciting for anybody who's a fan of a random encounter is your shared open world. And just before we started talking today, I was mentioning that it's been pretty cool to just run across other players in the world. And as a designer and as a player yourself, what do you see as the pros and cons of having this approach?
Yeah, so we wanted to make sure that we didn't design things where having another player felt like a bad thing, um, because it undermines the open world. Like having the ability to have the world actually realized and travel across it. And you know, in past Diablo games, you'd often be sitting in a menu. You might be sitting in a menu to create a new instance of the game, and we really wanted that those moments to take place in the game. We want to get people into the world, and then, okay, what am I going to do? Oh, I'm going to go do some nightmare dungeons. Okay, I'm going to go over and do that. And we wanted to ground those things in the world. Have the dungeons be in locations in the world. You know, Even the nightmare dungeons, and certainly, if you think about things like the Greater Rifts, like they're endlessly replayable, and they've got all these things, and it's really cool. But for the nightmare dungeons, we wanted to again link them to the world itself, and then say, okay, this nightmare dungeon is this place in this physical location, and then when you go in there, oh, it's going to be transformed, and it's going to be replayable and have all these other cool mechanics. um, but but it was important for us to make the world, um, sort of the set the place where all this action was taking place, and that even goes to the selecting your world tier. You can do within the world as well. Like, you can go up to the statue of Inaris and Killshot and change your world tier. So when we think about players interacting, um, we want we didn't want it to feel like, um, your role in the story and your role in the world was um, less meaningful because there are other players playing the game too.
Hmm.
So we didn't want to have a lot of situations where, you know, you're running up to some uh, NPC or quest giver, and they're saying, "Oh, I need you to go, rescue my child," and then there's like five other people there to rescue the child. Right? We wanted to really avoid that perception of, because it sort of breaks the feeling of it being a world, and especially in Diablo, that hasn't been that's not, Diablo is, you feel like you are an important character in the world, and often, like, in previous games, like, you're this sort of, key character, and you continue to be a key character. um, but if you feel like you're just one of 100 people doing these things, then it becomes much more mechanical. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about how often and how many people you should see when you're traveling around in the world. So in cities are shared spaces, they're public spaces. Let's get a lot of people in there, and let's like, you can form groups, and you can see other people, like, you can inspect other people, and you can see other people's gear and success, and you can talk to each other. But then out in the world, it should feel like it's a dangerous place. It's a place that, you need to deal with. Like, someone isn't going to come by and deal with the situation for you. But there can be situations where there could be an event, or like in the world boss, where there can be a moment for players to come together and help each other. And so when you look at, like, our event design, for example, in the world, we have things like, the mastery objective on the events. So you go in, you've got some villagers who are trapped under wagons. There are three wagons, and the objective is just, stop, hold off these waves of monsters. But if you can keep all of the villagers alive, you get additional rewards as part of that mastery objective. And the villagers are in different locations, so if you have another player there, that person can, take care of the top villager, and you can take care of the left villager, and it's advantageous. So we try to design those encounters so when you saw another player in the world, you didn't see too many players, and you were like, "Oh, I'm so glad there's another person here. Now we're going to get this mastery objective."
I love that approach, and it definitely comes through. Uh, yeah, I have to admit, I never felt overwhelmed by other players out in the open world. It does feel like you are exploring and not impinging on somebody else's territory. So it's nice when you run into other folks who can help you. So, jumping to another topic, you know, I don't think we talk overtly often in the industry about the importance of quality of life improvements, especially when it comes to sequels. And we talked about it a little bit before, but I feel like your vendor placement in the game and your cities is a really good example of uh, just an improvement and something that's thinking about how to make life better for players. Uh, so, what are some other quality of life improvements that you've made, and were there some that you took from feedback on the open beta?
Yeah. So, well, we changed the font, for example, which seems like kind of a like uh, to some players, it may have seemed like sort of not an important thing, but it was important to us that the font be highly readable, um, and so it was succeeding at that. In the original font was succeeding at that, um, but in pursuing that, we had sort of lost some of the Diablo aspect of it, and players rightly called that out, and so
Hmm.
we recognized that and changed it. We made a lot of iterations to Town Portal, which is a sort of a key mechanic of Diablo games in terms of um, making sure that it took you somewhere useful, right? Like it will take you to a capital city. At earlier points in development, you could sort of bind your town portal to different places, uh, and there was sort of some busy work in terms of making sure that your town portal was going to a good place. We sort of put that on the player, like, hey, it's your job to make sure your town portal takes you to a good place. And so as we continue to develop the game, we're like, look, I think we can determine, because sometimes you can't determine like a good answer for the player. You're like, look, we don't know what you want. We can't guess what you're going to want in this situation, and we don't want to just do something. So we can't just do something. But in this case, we're like, look, you need to be able to get to vendors. Um, uh, we're so, and you we don't you you we don't actually want to take you to an entirely different biome. That you're in. So we can take you to the capital city. It's going to have all the services that you need. Um, and then uh, the other half of that was, and if you want to go to a specific location, you can open the map and click on the waypoint to go there. And so with those two halves, we were able to have behavior that was convenient and easy for the player without the player losing the ability to go to a specific place if that's what they wanted at that moment.
That's a great example. Yeah, that's cool. Well, it comes through. I will share that it is wonderful getting around in the game. You've made it very easy, but also at the same time, you're not making it too easy, right? It feels like I am on a journey, and once I get to my location, I can always come back much more easily than I got there. But yeah, well, cool. Those are great. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
I want to come back to a topic that I mentioned earlier, and that is I obliquely referenced Endgame through Paragon, right? The
hmm
Paragon board. So, what makes a compelling Endgame approach, in your opinion?
Well, um, when the player reaches endgame, there's sort of a moment where something is stopping, like a campaign, for example, and then other things are starting. Like you have other systems that are coming online, probably. um, and so I think you want to have those things feel like they are interesting and not merely um, things that were sort of added on because I don't know, someone said this needs to have some number of hours of playtime, and so like, oh, I guess we have to, you want those to be, you want the player to reach that point and see sort of what's ahead, like the things that they can experience, and feel like, yeah, this is really cool. The developers cared about this. It wasn't just they didn't just assign one person to deal with this problem or something. Like they really cared about making sure that this is an interesting experience and that it will change. The experience changes, but that there are lots of cool things ahead, right? And so then, you know, what are those cool things? Well, we want to make sure that there's a variety of things that you're doing, so you're not um, doing just repeating the same thing endlessly. That can be fun if you're trying to maybe grind for some specific objective. It can be fun to like have a roadmap to that. But in general, if you're doing the same thing over and over again, it's going to get less interesting. So we want to have a variety of things. And if you have three or several things that the player can do, any given player is going to enjoy some of those things more than others of those things. So by having a variety of things, you also have the opportunity for players who like different things to have fun because they're not necessarily having fun doing the same activity, or if you're limited. And then, of course, the big one with Endgame is like have lots of depth, right? Like depths of itemization, depths of systems, depth of mechanics, and have the endgame provide ways to really get into the like build systems that can have lots of depth that you can build on, so you're not like reworking the systems. You don't want to get to the end game and be like, now you're playing an entirely different game than you're playing for the first 30 hours or whatever. So none of that stuff applies. Learn all new things. You want it to follow, and you want those systems to have continuity. Um, but yeah, have lots of depth for players to explore and really, I was talking about interesting choices in the skill tree. Um, Make sure that the end game presents even more of those interesting choices and ways to customize and feel powerful.
Yeah, that's exciting for me. Speaking as somebody who hasn't reached the end game, and I've read plenty about the Paragon system as one example of what you offer once you get further into the game, and that's fantastic. But I also am excited about the post launch content y'all have been talking about, right? Seasons in
Yeah.
particular, and it's exciting to know that after the launch, very, very soon after launch, you have new content coming players' way. And so, what you've spent some time explaining, I think, for in interviews, how seasons are going to give players the option to explore new content every quarter. Was this something that you wanted to do from the very beginning of development? Is this something that was always part of your plan?
Fairly early on, yeah. Um, we know we have the advantage of Diablo 3 having been out in the world for a long time. And that means that we've been able to sort of watch how players interacted with past Diablo games, and in particular, since Diablo 3 is the most recent with Diablo 3. And players consistently have said, hey, we like engaging with this world. Can you give us some more content for it? And so we knew that Diablo in particular as a series is the kind of game that um, where you build a game and then you can just keep adding to it, and that's what players are looking for. And so we knew that was going to be a key part going into it. Yeah.
Do you have a separate team that is devoted to seasons content?
We have some parallelization in terms of our development. Um, and so basically the team, as we finish up work on the shipping game, and of course we're going to continue to tune the game and balance and stuff. And as part of the live service, and also add content through seasons. And then we also are have stated that we plan to release expansions as well. So the team will move from the shipping. The team is moving has parts of the team have moved from the shipping development to the post-launch development.
Okay, well, I'll ask what might be an unfair question, but what is the difference in mindset one has to have as a sort of a launch focused developer versus a live services content creator?
Yeah, one of the things that's really I worked on on World of Warcraft for a while, and when you're releasing a game, we want to establish what the game is. We want to establish this is the game, and then when you're working on adding things to it, now you're adding things to an established entity that has sort of some definition and sort of some rules to it, and so that can seem like um, it's not as exciting as making the thing in the first place, but it can be really fun to to sort of work in that sort of mindset because you're making stuff that players get to see very soon after you make it, and they get to play the stuff that you made, and they have all kinds of thoughts on it, like, "Oh, I like this thing. Oh, I didn't like this thing." And then you're making more stuff. You're like, "Oh, great. You like this thing? We'll make more of that. Oh, you didn't like this thing? All right. Well, check out this new thing that we made. Look at this, right?" And so it can be really fun to work in that environment.
I imagine that's well, as a player, I am extremely excited to have much more Diablo in my life for the next several years. So I'm sure there are many, many players who are going to be thinking the same thing over this next year. So we've covered a lot, and I hope players and developers have taken away a ton of useful information from what you shared. So I have one last question for you. What do you and the team do to celebrate and to recharge when you have a launch that's so massive?
Yeah. um, part of it has been making sure that we're working in a sustainable way in terms of like we can't work in a way where we're sort of uh, we don't want to sort of burn developers out um, to sort of get to the launch and then not be able to continue to make changes to the game and add content. So it's been really important just to work sustainably and also to just acknowledge that this is a project that we're going to continue to work on for a long time. And so um, that means that we we take breaks along the way, and we you can kind of um, when you think about the launch of a game, you can think about it as like, well, I definitely can't take a break right now because the game is going to launch, or like. But there's always something. There's always more. We're going to be continuing to work on the game, so there's always going to be more, you know, uh, releases and stuff like that. And so it's important to just sort of take breaks along the way.
Got it. Well, huge congratulations to you and to the team, and I hope that the road ahead is exciting as you see more and more fan reactions coming in. And as a player, thank you for all that you and the team are doing.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to talk to you, and I've, I think that it's a cool podcast. So I'm glad to be invited to be on it.
Right on.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for joining us here today. It's really, really exciting to have you. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for all of our listeners here?
Thank you, Trent. It's a pleasure to be here. My name's Chris Hewish. I am a longtime veteran of the industry, and currently I am working as president at a company called Xsolla, which I can talk a little bit more about in a few moments. But just, for my pedigree and kind of one of the reasons that I am at the company now is I've had a long history of several decades working in the industry as a developer, publisher, worked at various media companies running their sort of interactive divisions, DreamWorks, places like that. Originally, I worked at Activision,
Oh,
even
wow.
Microprose before that. So it's been quite a journey. And then I've had the good fortune to run a few game studios along the way prior to this new role at Xsolla, where I get to work. What's really cool is I get to work with hundreds of companies all over the world and just get to work with a portfolio of several thousand games that are all using our technology. So it's a really great chance to see this industry at scale from a lot of different angles.
I bet. And it sounds like you already have seen the industry at scale from a lot of different angles too. And from what I understand of Xsolla, and you're going to have to help enlighten me, because I see there whenever I'm in the go-karting tournament at DICE, it's everywhere. I've still got Xsolla gloves that I wear when I ride my motorbike from my go-karting. But as someone who's spent time in development as well, from what I do understand about Xsolla, it's an incredibly developer-forward suite of products and services that you offer. So what is Xsolla for the developers listening here?
So Xsolla is a company focused purely on the video game space. And we provide the tools, the technology that you would need to go direct to consumer with your games business. So, and what does that mean? Well, that means everything from being able to use our pay station to do transactions on your website or within your game, or even in your in-game store, where we connect you with over 700 different payment methods worldwide, over 200 regions, to technology that allows you to build your own game launcher, your own login system, anti-fraud tech, a lot of the back-end things that you would need to actually run your own business as your own games business. And then we also provide a lot of other things. We have a web shop for our mobile partners that allows them to do business outside of the app stores. And I can talk more about that in a few minutes. It's been incredibly successful. We also have developed some technologies that allow you to work directly with influencers and affiliate marketing campaigns. That's one of our newer sort of endeavors. And we're actually going to be announcing something called Drops in a week or so here, where you're able to work with whether it's influencers or other partners to create limited drops that you can hand out to your audience, and to get them to come and check out your game. And that's been a really cool new addition to our portfolio of tools. But just think of it as, if you want to run your games business, you've great on maybe some third party platform like Steam or the Epic Game Store. You should always be working with them, or the App Store, Google Play, whatever it might be. But maybe you also want to take your game and go directly to players. Well, we're the company that can help you do that. And it sounds like, well, what do you mean? Why should we go direct to players? Well, it turns out that it's a great way to, as I like to say, the 3 R's: increase revenue, extend your reach, and build deeper relationships with your players. So by increasing revenue, what a lot of people don't realize is there's a big audience of players out there in the world that are unable to actually spend on your games because they're in a tier 2 or tier 3 region that may not have PayPal or Visa or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. When you said 700 currencies, I was like, well, I couldn't think of 7 off the top of my head, right? So that's that reach that you're talking about as well, that second R, right?
That's exactly right. So it increases the reach because it allows more people to come in to your game and actually enjoy playing it and convert into spenders, right? And this is pretty meaningful. We see anywhere from 20 to 40% increase in the number of players that can actually spend on your
That's
game.
incredible.
In some markets, in Japan, for instance, something like 40% of the players out there use alternative payment methods that you're not normally getting through the platforms that you normally use.
And like you're saying, I guess Xsolla's not out here taking on Steam or PlayStation or Xbox or, trying to replace them, right? This is an auxiliary form of revenue and reach that potentially even those platforms may not have access to.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Trent. And it's really important to remember it's not just take $1 off of one store and bring $1 in a different way. It really is an incremental increase in your business. And, we've seen that on the PC and the browser side for many years. And now we're seeing it with mobile companies that are using our web shops, where they are actually they're getting new players, new, increased revenue streams that are not negative towards, their existing app store revenues, which is great.
Wow, incredible. So PlayStation and web shop are sort of your primary products here, or were they your earlier ones? But you've got a whole suite of other products. Am I correct?
We do, Trent. Yeah, we have a bunch of other products. Those are 2 of our biggies for sure. But we have something called Digital Distribution Hub, which is kind of a mouthful, but all it means is it's a way to get your assets up online and get them out to. We may have all heard about super apps. We know Twitter or X is becoming a super app. These are big. These are big in Asia already. But being able to get your digital assets up into a distribution hub allows them to be sourced out to all these new, sort of distribution channels like super apps or telco carrier stores or whatever it might be. So that's sort of one that we've just got up and running, which we think is going to be really big. We've had some good early results on that. We have the Drops campaign I mentioned through our partner network. We have also our funding club, and that's kind of an interesting one where everybody's looking for funding always.
Yeah.
And that this is kind of our service to the industry where we actually don't get anything out of the funding club, but what we do is we're always talking with developers, and if we see a game that we think is really great, a prototype somebody's working on, and we are willing to say yes, this is good, we'll take it and introduce it to this funding club we have, which I believe is now over 130 publishers, investors, companies that are on the lookout for good games. And for them, it's like, hey, Xsolla is going to pre-screen games for us and bring them into the club. And we've had really good results where quite a few games have been funded out of that. We don't get a piece of it, but of course we hope in success they'll eventually need our services. So
Yeah, they remember that. They've got the Xsolla fridge magnet on there.
Yeah, exactly.
They're ready to go.
So, and we do a whole bunch more, but that's kind of a quick summary of some of the biggies.
Right. Well, before we wrap up here, now a lot of people, like I said, we see the names everywhere. Even if we understand the services, we may not understand not only how large Xsolla is as a company, but how global they are. So maybe in some of our, in the minute or so that we got left here, why don't you tell folks a little bit about where you are around the world and Xsolla as a company?
Yeah, thank you, Trent. We are a big company now. We've got over 800 people located all over the world. We have our HQ is in Los Angeles, but we have several big development hubs. Most recently, we opened one in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. It's over 200 people now. Fantastic city. Anyone who can get there, I highly recommend it. We have regional offices in Berlin, which services all of Europe. We have offices in Seoul, South Korea, in China, Middle East, CIS, the Americas, all of Latin America, Canada, and the US as well. I'm actually based out in North Carolina, just down the street from our friends at at a big game company that people might know in Cary. So yeah, we've got a great team and a real global team.
Amazing. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Chris. Thanks again for the motorcycle gloves as well. And really, really great to have you on and to hear all about Xsolla. Like I said, it's, we see you everywhere at events and the branding, and I've met so many folks from Xsolla, and it's, even though I might have an idea of what you do, it's so varied, and, you're all over the industry. So thanks for coming and sharing it with us today.
Yeah, thanks, Trent. We're really here to help everybody succeed with their game business, and hope to see you on the kart track again.
All right. Look out. Thanks, mate.
Thank you.